Scott Joplin remains the best-known ragtime musician and composer. His rags were highly innovative, characterized by a lyricism and suppleness that elevated ragtime from honky-tonk piano music to a serious art form. But for all of his prominence and recognition, many of the facts regarding his life still elude us. What we do know, we have learned from various sources, such as copyrights to sheet music, census data, city directories, and oral histories from colleagues and proteges.
Scott Joplin was born in Linden, Texas, which is located just south of Texarkana, sometime around 1867 or 1868. His father, Giles, was a former slave, but his mother, Florence, was a free black woman. By the time he was 2, they were living in Texarkana, where his parents introduced him to music and musical instruments. As a youth, he received formal training in classical music, and it was out of this experience that grew Joplin's lifelong aspiration to create a classical form of American music.
After a stint as a traveling musician, Joplin settled in Sedalia in the mid-1890s. It is believed that he studied at George R. Smith College, an educational institution for blacks. Unfortunately, the college burned, and along with it, vital historical clues. Joplin supported himself by teaching piano and composition to several young ragtime composers, including Arthur Marshall and Scott Hayden. Employed by the honky-tonks, bars, and brothels, whose patrons could not get enough of ragtime, Joplin formalized his style and started down his lifelong path as a published composer. It was in Sedalia, Missouri, that Joplin met John Stark, who would eventually publish 1/3 of Joplin's known works. In 1899, Stark published Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, boosting Joplin to the top of the list of ragtime composers and moving ragtime music into prominence as a popular musical form. Joplin always maintained that his music should be played slowly. He often commented that rags in general were played too fast. Scott Joplin moved to St. Louis with his new wife, Belle, the widow of Scott Hayden's older brother. The couple rented a modest walk-up flat at 2658A Morgan Street, today called Delmar Boulevard. Originally settled by Germans and other immigrants, by the turn of the 20th century, the neighborhood had become predominantly African American. At the time Joplin lived there, it was the most densely populated area of St. Louis. Located nearby were the honky-tonks and dives of the notorious Chestnut Valley, the city's red light district, and it was a major center for the early development of black Midwestern ragtime. A streetcar ran down Morgan Street. This made it easy for the musicians who lived in the area to get to the places where they performed.
While Joplin at first performed in the various saloons and clubs in St. Louis, he was soon making enough royalties from the Maple Leaf Rag that he was able to stop performing and to fully concentrate on composing and teaching. While renting the Morgan Street flat, it is thought that he composed The Entertainer, Elite Syncopations, and Easy Winners, among others.
His rag, The Cascades, proved to be a popular piece performed during the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, also known as the St. Louis World's Fair. It is also believed that while living here, he wrote his first operetta, The Guest of Honor, which has since been lost, as well as began work on his full-length opera, Premonition. Colleagues of Joplin recall that he never composed at the piano, but carried paper to jot down ideas or sat at a desk to compose. This violin illustrates a story told by Arthur Marshall, one of Joplin's proteges, that his wife Belle did not like the music. Joplin began giving Belle violin lessons in the hope that it would inspire her to love the music as much as he did. This experiment failed miserably. By 1903, Belle had left Scott. There are no known surviving photographs of her.
During 1904, Joplin met and married his second wife, Lady Alexander of Little Rock, while traveling to Texarkana to visit family. Sadly, Freddie developed pneumonia and died within 10 weeks of their marriage. She is buried in Sedalia. However, her gravesite has not been located. No pictures of Freddie survive, but some historians believe that the woman on the cover of the Vecino walls is Freddie. This is the only piece of mourning music written by Joplin. The sheet music cover is the only one to feature a portrait of a woman, and Joplin dedicated the piece to the people he stayed with while he mourned Freddie's death.
Joplin moved to New York in 1907. He would spend the remainder of his life and much of his money trying to get his opera, Trementia, published and produced. He met Lottie Stokes, whom he allegedly married. We know that he signed his finances over to her, but a marriage certificate is still not available. Joplin died from the side effects of syphilis in 1917 and is buried in Astoria, New York, in a common grave at St. Michael's Cemetery. His grave remained unmarked until 1974.
Publisher John Stark stated after Joplin's death, "Scott Joplin is dead. A homeless itinerant, he left his mark in American music." Yet critical acclaim for Joplin's artistic ability did not come until nearly 60 years later. During the ragtime revival of the 1970s, most of Joplin's works were reissued by publishers, performed by professional and amateur musicians, and examined by music scholars.
Trementia was lavishly staged in New York City by the Houston Grand Opera Company. Joplin was also awarded a special Pulitzer Prize during the 1976 bicentennial celebration for his contribution to American music. Trementia continues to be performed across the country by professional opera companies. In 1977, Universal Studios celebrated his life with a feature-length film biography, starring Art Carney as publisher John Stark and Billy D. Williams as Scott Joplin. The United States Postal Service honored Joplin with the 1983 commemorative stamp. Scott Joplin had finally gained national recognition for his contributions to American music. Joplin lived here on Delmar Boulevard for about 2 years, and is the only known standing structure that is linked directly to him during his years in St. Louis. The property is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and in 1981 became part of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources Division of State Parks. The State Historic Site features museum exhibits interpreting Joplin's life and work. Tours of the upstairs flat are also given to the general public. While the apartment contains no actual artifacts of Joplin, it is furnished to the period. The wallpaper has been restored to replicas of what was found during renovation. Floors are largely original. The original gas lights still work. Entry to the apartment would have been through the 2658A door, leading straight up the stairs from the street. At the top of the stairs is what we believe was a bedroom for Scott and Belle Joplin. The bedroom opens into the parlor, where we see many items, such as a violin, representative of stories told about Belle and Scott's life while living in St. Louis. The portrait above the mantel is one of 5 existing known portraits of Joplin, and probably the best known. The piano is turn of the century, and is placed there because it is the only area structurally sound enough to support the weight of a piano. The desk in the alcove off the parlor represents a place where Joplin might have composed his music while living here. Because of the extensive alterations to the building, historians are continually challenged to sort out the use of the rooms while the Joplins lived here. His one-time pupil, Scott Hayden, and his wife reportedly lived in the attic area. The kitchen is furnished to the period. Coal for the stove would have been brought up from the cellar. Ice blocks would be delivered and carried up the stairs to keep their perishable food cold. Several markets were close by on Beaumont and Morgan Streets. The washroom has examples of clothes washers and wringers that were used during the time period. The washroom has a door to a balcony that accessed the backyard where several outbuildings, including the privies, were located. Gangways, small alleys between buildings, afforded access from the street. Many former residents of this neighborhood remember families gathering in the back instead of on the front porches or stoops at the end of the day. Currently, the privies and common areas are being excavated, which will give us hints on the day-to-day activities of people living in this neighborhood 100 years ago. The state of Missouri has also reconstructed the new Rosebud Cafe, a structure depicting a local turn-of-the-century bar and gaming club. Such venues were common in the Midwest and along the Mississippi River. The outside of the Rosebud was retrofitted to the original building on the site, which was a pharmacy. The interior is a recreation of the original Rosebud owned by Tom Turpin, who was one of Scott Joplin's biggest supporters. Turpin was not only the first African American to publish a rag, but he and the Rosebud served as an incubator of sorts for young musicians to study this new and evolving music form. The opportunity to learn and play rags at the Rosebud was the starting point for jobs for many artists. In keeping with this legacy, the new Rosebud Cafe now sponsors live ragtime and other events to promote modern appreciation of this American music form.
Although Joplin's time in this St. Louis building was brief, the legacy that he created while living between these walls is unmatched. It was here that he revealed himself to be a composer of substance, his music clearly transcending the commonplace quality of most ragtime compositions. Please, take time to visit this historic site in downtown St. Louis. Study the exhibits, tour the apartment, transport yourself back in time when rags were in and Scott Joplin was king. Thank you for your support of Missouri's State Park.